The DVAP collaborates to collect, develop, and distribute resources and ideas relevant to advocates' ongoing public awareness, prevention, and education efforts during DVAM and beyond. And today's webinar is co-sponsored by the many organizations that form the DVAP's advisory committee. So let's start with our first presenter. We have our very own Joe Ostrander, and we want to welcome Joe. Hi, Joe. Joe
Hello.
Coordinates the communications, branding, and marketing of the NRCDV multiple initiatives. He works with all the NRCDV teams to ensure consistency of information, projects, messaging, and promotion. He has a BA in Communications, Public Relations from Kutztown, I'm sorry that I mispronounced, University,
Okay.
and an MA in Corporate Communications from Duquesne University.
Duquesne.
Welcome, Joe. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. I'm so glad that we're here, and I'm so excited about being able to bring the one thing message to our audience today and to talk about how we developed it and to provide some tools for people to incorporate this into their Domestic Violence Awareness Month activities and campaigns that they're going to do locally. So as Yvonne said, the DVAP is a group of organizations and individuals who advise on awareness initiatives and activities. We've developed messaging for other domestic violence awareness months. This year, we wanted to focus on developing a unified message, something that can be used across the whole domestic violence network, something that would be much more diverse and would resonate with multiple audiences. So we came up with one thing. And one thing provides a framework for us to engage in critical conversations and then move to action. Sort of like thinking about what is your one thing. My one thing is, the one thing I will do. Those were the questions that we asked ourselves when we were at the convened as the DVAP and helped us to develop this message. And while many people care about domestic violence and the intersecting issues, they often don't move to action. And many times it's because the issue just feels so overwhelming for people. And what we felt was one thing can help those see that they can do something. Just imagine if 7.4 billion people each committed to doing one thing. We really believe, and I think you might agree, that this will definitely create some social change. So the one thing message unites our individual voice while highlighting the power of our collective action. And to expand a bit more, one thing will bring awareness of the individual contribution, moving people to action. It can inspire thinking, and those small steps then can lead to real change. So let's talk about sharing our one thing. There's value and power to your story of your one thing. Your story, the survivor's story, the advocate's story, and the community's story. These inspire people and shape views. When one person inspires others, there's a ripple effect that over time broadens and can continue to have an impact on future generations. When you share your one thing, you give value to each action. You show the strength of change makers and the impact of healing and resilience. You demonstrate the role that all play and the power of sharing to raise awareness and change. To provide guidance around one thing, the DVAP came together and also developed an action guide. We wanted to be able to offer some tangible tools and resources to support the efforts of those in the field to spread the word within the community. So today I'm going to walk through some of the key aspects of the action guide. We will have a full, complete action guide, both hard copy and an online digital copy, available very soon. But one of the neat things that we are excited about being able to offer to those who have registered and attended today's webinar session is that we are going to provide you with an advanced of the public release of the action guide so you can have it in your hands and get started early. We'll be providing that next Wednesday on August 1st. It will be provided as a link, an attachment within the follow-up email that you will receive from this webinar. So please make sure that you don't ignore that email, and that just in case you check spam filters, because we all know how things can end up in there. So we're going to start with our One Thing Community Pledge. This is a part of our action guide that we developed. And the pledge is a call to action. It's an invitation and an opportunity to affirm commitment to end DV. You can see some of the key points on the pledge. The actual pledge document will be available for download so that you can print it out and bring it to events, trainings. You can hand it out to staff. You could bring it when you're doing advocacy work. And it's something that you can provide to people within the field. When we talk about communicating one thing, the one thing is about moving from awareness to action and how anyone and everyone can take small steps that lead to change. Because just as people are multidimensional, so is the application of one thing. This allows the message to be broad enough for multiple audiences. It's applicable to different people and their own lived experiences. I want you to think about how it can be applied to advocates, to doctors and those in the healthcare field, to law enforcement officers, to survivors, educators, researchers, policymakers, and on and on. It's also relevant to diverse, intersecting, and multi-layered experiences of domestic violence, trauma, and oppression. So when we get into actually setting up and talking about communicating one thing, one of the first steps that you need to do is to talk about setting your message goals. This could be around, your goals could be around engagement. It could be talking about awareness. You may want to do some audience building. It could have a fundraising aspect. It could be conversation shifting. One thing is not intended to replace an existing communication strategy or campaign that you already have in place or you're already planning for Domestic Violence Awareness Month. It's intended to complement your current efforts. We also wanted to mention about a guide that was developed last year. It was a technical assistance guidance developing social media campaigns for Domestic Violence Awareness Month. It has great tips for those to establish, for helping you to establish campaign goals. And quite frankly, it has some other great tips and pointers for other aspects of developing social media campaign. You can find it on our online library, vaunet.org. Just search for social media campaigns, and it will be one of the results. I've included the link here, which you'll be able to, I know you probably can't write it down quick enough, but for those of you, when we publish the recording, you'll be able to see it then as well. So audience is one of the next steps in thinking about communicating one thing. And selecting an audience is crucial. And your audience really should be based on your goals. So after you've developed what goals you want to reach in your, when you are developing your messaging campaigns, then from there you can go off of your audience. Be careful not to get caught up in the aspect of trying to reach everyone. It's a typical thing that we want to try to make our messages so that it can reach so many audiences at once. And as the quote at the bottom says, an audience of everyone is an audience of no one. Another aspect of every campaign is about choosing the right communication channels, and this is important. So you have to think about what type of options and channels you have within the resources of your organization or as an individual. That could be your website. It could be the various social media channels that you're involved with, your organization. But don't just think digital as well. Remember that in-person opportunities need to be part of the strategy too, and this could be trainings, special community events, and other types of things that you do as an organization for outreach. So when we talk about crafting our message, some of the key points that we want to make sure you remember while you're doing one thing messaging are these following things. Here's 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men experience violence. There's no one thing that will end domestic violence, but our collective power will. We can all do one thing towards eradicating domestic violence. Sharing our stories can have a ripple effect and can inspire others to action. And one thing offers community tangible ways to get involved in the efforts to end domestic violence. So the action guide will also provide marketing support and tools. I'm going to touch on some of these. So obviously one of the most noticeables is the use of the hashtag. This can be used in our social media. We are using one thing, using the number, not the word. And we've developed a logo, which of course incorporates the hashtag, and we hope that you will use those in your Domestic Violence Awareness Month materials that you develop. We've developed a color scheme for those of you that may be wanting to create your own materials. This helps provide connection to the traditional colors that have been used in the domestic violence movement, and sticking with these colors can also keep consistency across our network messaging. And we will also have graphics. I've provided here a couple samples of some fun that we had with the One Thing logo while making sure that we try to maintain the look. Here's a graphic that we developed that you may have seen, and if you've been following our social media. This ties into the campaign that we have been using, the campaign messaging that we've been using for the past several years, which is awareness plus action equals social change. And we tied this in through the use of visual with the action. We're hoping that you can, this gives you some ideas of how you can do the same thing in your development. Here's some other fun graphics that we've put together so you can see how we've tried to see about using the one thing message and the one thing imagery. We have lots of these that are available. I just wanted to provide a few for people to look at, and I can see some really fun ways to tie in some messaging on this, and the one on the left could be tied into some messaging around self-care, and the one on the right with the dog, which, by the way, for those of you who are already going, aw, we have lots of images that we've created with some animals. The one with the dog could be tied into messaging around sheltering with animals, the importance of pets and healing and resilience, and animal abuse as well. The guide will also include lots of samples and shareables, social media cards, Facebook and Twitter banners, website banners, signature lines, overlays for Facebook, as well as we want to develop some GIFs. All of these events, all of these samples, and all of the things that I've shared with you, and we have many more, will be available through the online toolkit, the online action guide. That will be available for download. They're there for you to use. They're also there to inspire some ideas for you to develop some on your own. And we're hoping that people will develop those and we'll share them, and then we can add them to the online action guide and grow that library so it's not just the things that the DVAP has developed, but that we can develop a large library of materials and graphics and other ideas that people have developed. We'll also have sample social media posts. This slide and the next one is just an example of some few that we've developed already and some ways that we're trying to touch on different topic areas and how one thing can resonate with different intersecting issues and based on the type of audience that you're trying to reach. And again, we will have a document with many, many of these, and we hope that people will share ones that they develop for as well. I also wanted to touch on the quickly strategy that and show you some examples of the strategy that NRCDV has used to integrate one thing into our own activities and events that we're planning for Domestic Violence Awareness Month. This first one you may have seen as well if you've been following our social media channels. We've done podcast series as part of NRCDV Radio in the past, and we plan on doing another series this October focused on one thing. We currently have a call for stories out right now, looking for people to submit ideas and their story about what is their one thing. We hope that you'll consider doing that or share this information along so that other people can submit their ideas and stories as well. And other ways that we're working this into it is on October 1st, we will have the annual National Call of Unity, and that will focus, the topic will be around the one thing that people can do again to make a difference. It's been an audio call in the past, and we will still have that feature, but new this year, we're also going to add a video feature. And on October 10th, we will have another webinar talking about leveraging one thing within your community. And October 24th, we will have a Twitter chat focused on what's your one thing. So you can see we have taken this idea and this messaging to work it into our events around Domestic Violence Awareness Month. One other aspect about one thing in the messaging that we've put together and the hopes that the DVAP had for this campaign is that this does not just end in October, and that it is one thing, and it's one thing for DVAM and beyond, that this is a message that can be incorporated into all of your communication efforts, not just for the month of October. With that, I thank you for your attention, and I'll turn it back over to Yvonne.
Thanks so much, Joe. A couple of things that I want to remind everyone. One is that there's only 6 to 7 days before DVAM, so we need to get ready. And also that we have Brecken really busy working the public chat. She has added now the link to our call for stories. And also, I know that some of you were asking about a copy of the presentation you're going to be receiving, as she wrote. You're going to be receiving a follow-up email. It's going to contain the recording and a PDF of the PowerPoint presentation. So now I want to introduce Tonia Moultry, and she's going to be our next presenter, and she's NNEDV's Capacity Technical Team Deputy Director. Before joining NNEDV, Tonia served as the Training and Technical Assistance Director at the Ohio Domestic Violence Network, where she assisted domestic violence programs around the state by providing on-site training and consultation for a variety of programming needs. Tonia began her career at ODVN as the Outreach Coordinator to Underserved Populations, in which she worked with domestic violence programs and allied professionals to become more inclusive and culturally competent in their practices and policies. Tonia served as a co-facilitator for ODVN statewide training. She was also responsible for convening the Legal Advocacy Caucus and the Women of Color Caucus. Today, Tonia is going to be focusing on how to integrate the DVAM 2018 hashtag one thing message into your communication strategy. Tonia, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. I appreciate that. And Joe, you set this up perfectly, so I'm glad to be following you and just really going to give some examples in terms of some communication strategies and some ways that we can work this in. And this is just very few ideas. I am sure that as advocates, you are significantly much more creative and will come up with great ways to do this. I really do just want to emphasize that this really is a universal theme. As Joe was saying, that it can be incorporated into any of our domestic violence awareness month events or our ongoing communication strategy. We really do want you to utilize this throughout the year so that it becomes trending, right? So as we look at either on Twitter or as we're doing stuff on Facebook, I think it also becomes a great way as you're doing your sort of end of the year wrap up that you can kind of go back and sort of point to how many people in your community sort of pledged to do one thing, or what were those one things that people in your community said that they were going to do. So I think there becomes ways that we can continue to build on that. I think it creates a story of how our communities are going to work collectively to end domestic violence, but I also think it becomes a way of just some accountability for all of us, right? That we don't have to do everything, but it's really just that one thing that we can do that can make a difference. And when we put it with everything else that folks are doing, we can absolutely change the world. So really thinking about this as a universal theme. So when we think about some of our communities, our communication strategies, when we're looking at our allies or our community members, so as we're at these events, so as you're doing trainings, as you're maybe doing a table presentation, maybe you're out at a health fair or at a county fair or something like that, I want you to really think about asking people to sort of identify that one thing that they can do as community members. So I don't know how many of you maybe have tables at various fairs or whatever, but this is absolutely a place where you could have people sort of be able to write out, like, sort of what is the one thing that they can do to end domestic violence, or what's the one thing they can do to support survivors of domestic violence. So, and I think that you could just use that even like at your table, right, to sort of maybe start to put that up behind you, and so it begins to sort of build some excitement. I honestly believe that this is an easy campaign for us to pull our community members into and our allies, because we are only asking people to pledge one thing, right? And so that feels easy enough, right, for people to do that. So I really want to make sure we're encouraging our community folks to do that. And this may be something that hopefully maybe some of our community members and some allies will actually pick up and want to use at their events as well, right, so that that becomes again, it becomes something that the community really is starting to take ownership of. So at events, we can definitely print off that pledge that Joe talked about to have people sort of do their one thing, or you could do it at the end of a training as well, and I think being able to read that and really having people sign that, it also gives people, like, just again, a sense of accountability, and I said that I would do this, and kind of being allowed for them to go back. Encourage folks at the end of trainings to go back, share information they've learned with their family, with their friends, and get those folks to also start talking about what is the one thing that they could do. So we can find lots of ways to use this to make it have an impact. In terms of specifically sort of some of the things that we are doing here at AABV in terms of our communication strategies, we have our 31 and 31 campaign that we're going to do again this year. So we're going to put out one graphic per day in October, and we're really going to focus this around survivors' rights, which is super exciting. I think that this isn't a place that maybe a lot of, especially community members or allies, really think about in terms of survivors having rights, and so this becomes a way to raise that issue up, right, and to really get people thinking about that. So we could ask that you definitely share your daily graphics on your agency social media. Ask your followers to share that one thing. So, for example, what's the one thing survivors need to protect their rights? Or what's the one thing that they can do to actively support survivors' rights? So we gave you a couple examples there at the bottom of the slide, but we just want you to think about ways that you can begin to incorporate that. And I think that becomes a really rich discussion also for us to have with other advocates, for us to have with community members, to really start talking about those rights that survivors have and identifying those. Next thing that we're going to be doing is on Tuesday, October 16th, we will have a Twitter chat, and our hashtag for that is hashtag safety for survivors. And so as we really think about this for our Twitter chat participants, we're going to be really prompting folks to answer the question related to what's the one thing that they can do to promote safety for survivors. And so just kind of, again, beginning to get that conversation going, and we'll definitely have that, and we're going to promote that out there, and we're going to want people to really join in. And again, coming up with all the amazing ways, and I think just listening to how people believe that they can help promote safety for survivors can also maybe trigger some other things for us to think about as advocates, or may spur us into some other action in our communities. Finally, this hashtag is not only limited to advocates or community members or allies. I think that we can also find ways to bring survivors into this conversation. So as Joe was saying, this is really about helping people be able to tell that story, right? And what does that look like? And, you know, we can focus on, and oftentimes the focus is on the terrible and tragic things that survivors have been through. As we work through and we begin to understand and as we learn more about trauma, we want to focus on the healing aspects, right, the strength of survivors. We really want to bring forward the things that are good in survivors' lives, so we want to be able to highlight those things as well, which is why I really love the fact that that we're really focusing on survivors' rights and what do survivors need for safety. But we can bring our survivors into this. And so as we think about this, really thinking about for one thing for survivors. So because it's a universal message, they can share any aspect of their story that they want to. So if you are working at a local program, right, and you have a shelter service, it would be great to have survivors maybe as they're leaving, or maybe as just part of a activity that you're doing with the survivors, maybe with their children, to have them sort of do what's the one thing that they've gained by being at the program, or what's the one thing that they've learned, or, you know, fill that in, right? So it can really be uplifting to others that are coming into the shelter. You know, folks come into a shelter at the worst time of their lives, and to be able to see that others that have come before them, other people that have used these services, have gotten these positive experiences out of this, that this is how it has been helpful. So it's not, you know, I don't have to tell you my whole story, but if I can just share with you what did I learn, or what am I taking away from this experience, I think can just be very empowering for other survivors to hear. So you can do a one-thing board that can be posted up all year, so in the shelter, so, you know, just as folks come, and you can put that up there, and so it can just become something that is ongoing. We obviously always want you to keep in mind privacy and safety, so if you can find a way to be able to take a picture of that, share that on your social media at the end of the year, whatever the case is, as long as we're able to maintain survivors' privacy and their safety, then we would want to also put that out there, because I think it's a way of celebrating the strength that survivors have, that again, oftentimes is not part of the conversation that is happening sort of in the larger discourse with community members or allies. So with that, I hope that that has kind of inspired you to has maybe sort of helped you think about ways to incorporate one thing into your existing plans already for the year. And as Domestic Violence Awareness Month is coming up, and I'm sure Yvonne is going to remind us again how many days we have, so we're on a big countdown for that. But also just, again, I really want to emphasize that we want to move this, not just the Domestic Violence Awareness Month is obviously incredibly important, but we want people to have this conversation year-round. We want to continually find ways to incorporate this one thing into all of this that we're doing, no matter what it is, so that we can continue to bring that awareness to the community. So thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to just sort of share some ideas for you, and I look forward to seeing sort of what it is that we come up with across the nation.
Thank you so much, Tonia. And yes, only 67 days before the beginning of DVAM. So we have time. And the great thing about the action guide is that it's going to be, you're going to receive it first, and we're going to have it translated. So you can also use it in the Latino community. So we're very excited about this. We're excited that the National Latino Network, Casa de Esperanza, they are joining our efforts, and they're part of our advisory group, and they're going to be taking, you know, on all this great work with our Latino communities. So help me welcome Shaina Goodman. She is our wonderful public policy director. Shaina provides programmatic leadership and oversight to NRCDD's administrative advocacy and policy-related technical assistance with an emphasis on the intersection of domestic violence and family policy, economic justice, housing, and public benefits. She also plays a central role in the key initiatives, including building comprehensive solutions to domestic violence and the DV Evidence Project. Shaina has prior experience in federal legislative and appropriations advocacy, grassroots organizing, and campus-based advocacy and training. She has completed research on domestic violence in the Jewish community, the history of the domestic violence, and the effectiveness of dance movement therapy for domestic survivors and their children. She is passionate about social work, especially as it relates to privilege, oppression, and intergroup dialogue. Shaina received her JD, a master's in social work, and a bachelor's degree in women's and gender studies from Washington University in St. Louis. She's licensed to practice law in the state of Maryland. Welcome, Shaina.
Thank you so much, Yvonne, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. I'm already getting super excited about all the different ways that the One Thing message is going to be popping up across the country during DVAM and beyond. So one thing as you prepare, as you prepare for DVAM and for this campaign is we really want to encourage you all to incorporate policy and systems advocacy into your messaging. I think DVAM has historically and traditionally focused primarily on messages around awareness raising, prevention, and supporting survivors, and of course those are absolutely critical. But DVAM is really an opportunity to connect folks in your communities to the policy issues that you care about and to prompt people to think about how some of these bigger systems level and policy issues impact survivors and their families and the communities in which we all live. So as DVAM approaches, we encourage you all to use this as a time to really intentionally start laying the groundwork for systems level advocacy if that's not something that you're already doing. So what does that look like? As a first step, this is an opportunity to do some analysis about how systems in your community are or are not working for survivors. And this could be the child welfare system or housing programs and services or public benefit programs like TANF or SNAP, all the different systems that are operating on survivors' lives. So start to notice the patterns that are popping up in survivors' experiences. Take the time to really learn and understand the system's rules and policies, whether they're official or unofficial. And, be ambitious. Do this for all of the primary systems in your communities. Pick one or two, whatever feels comfortable. But we want you all to use this one thing messaging and this inspiring call to action to really prompt all of us to do some of that systems level work. Another core component of this is reaching out to new partners in your community, people who work directly within these other systems as well as other advocacy organizations that are working alongside you to improve systems and policies in your community. So maybe that's an anti-poverty coalition in your state or something like that. And really, using DVAM to intentionally start building those relationships. This is also an opportunity to start making some commitments that will really deepen advocacy as an organization. And that could be things like committing to doing new cross-trainings with some of these new partners that you're going to develop, or working together on shared advocacy campaigns, or any sort of collaborative approach that helps advance system and policy responses on behalf of survivors. DVAM in the One Thing campaign is also a perfect opportunity to share your policy priorities with your organization's audience. So use this to think about the policies that are most important to the survivors that you work with and to your community, and then really intentionally tie that into your DVAM messaging. So for example, your one thing could be to learn more about how a particular policy impacts survivors. Or you could say in a tweet, one thing I want my member of Congress to know about X policy is, or my one thing that I'm going to commit to this DVAM is to call my elected official and ask them to support X policy on behalf of survivors. If you're feeling a little stuck, we have some policy priorities that are really important to us at the National Resource Center that we're happy to share. So some of the policy issues that we're going to be prioritizing using the one thing messaging include the importance of VAWA, FIPSA, and VOCA, support that those funding streams and programs give to survivors and communities. We're also prioritizing economic security policies like paid leave, equal pay, and affordable childcare, and really talking about the connection between financial stability and safety in survivors' lives. Another one of our top policy priorities for this DVAM is addressing over-incarceration, things like the school-to-prison pipeline and other policies or systems that result in the disproportionate incarceration of people of color. Other policy ideas to talk about during DVAM include common sense gun reform, and this is something we know that many communities are thinking and talking about, but policies in their communities that support safety for immigrant victims of domestic violence. So that could be things like asylum and changes to asylum policy that have happened recently, or the need for victims to be safe and not have to worry that they might be deported or detained when they go seek services from the courthouse or a hospital or some other community-based organization. So those are just some ideas to get you started. But again, we really want to encourage you all to use this as an opportunity to really think about, okay, what are the policy priorities that we're hearing come up from the survivors that we work with, and how can we communicate the importance of those topics to our community and our audience? The last message that we're really pushing this DVAM is the importance of voting and civic engagement. This is especially timely because, in case you aren't aware, there's a very important election happening in November. So we at NRC are going to be sharing with our audience that one thing they can do is commit to voting. And we would really encourage all of you to incorporate the same messaging throughout October. This is also a really critical opportunity to help people understand the connections between how they vote and the policies that impact survivors' lives. So not only candidates, but also many states have ballot initiatives that will be on the ballot in November, and those can include policies that will really play a role in survivor safety and well-being and the health and safety of communities. So even as nonprofit organizations, there's a lot that you can do to encourage voter participation, to educate people on the candidates and issues in a nonpartisan way. The second link that you'll see on your screen there and that you'll get with the copy of the slides is a link to a really great tool from an organization called Nonprofit Vote that provides very clear guidance on what 501c3 organizations can and cannot do when it comes to voter registration and participation and voter education and engaging with candidates directly as well. So in preparation for October, take some time to read through that guidance, get up to speed on what you can and can't do. This is also, the one thing messaging is also a really great moment to help ensure that the survivors that you work with, as well as other folks in your community, are registered to vote. So Tonia was talking about, folks maybe at health fairs or other community-wide events, and that's also a great time to register voters. I also want to point out that NNEDV has some really excellent guidance on safety and privacy considerations to keep in mind as you're working to register survivors to vote. And that is all I have to say about the policy and systems advocacy. I'm excited to see how you all take up this call to action to really think bigger and incorporate some of that systems level work in your messaging in DVAM. And I will pass it back to Yvonne. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Shaina. As you can see on the slide, there's you can contact any individual. Tonia's information is there just in case if you have any questions. Now I know that the chat box has been very, very active. I want to ask Brecken if you have any questions. And while she let us know if we have any questions or you post your questions to the presenters, I want to allow some time for our presenters to share any last thoughts, comments, ideas that they want to share with you guys. So let's start with Joe. Joe, anything else? Anything that you want to share with our participants? Joe, I think you're muted.
Sorry, I was on mute.
No problem. Any last thoughts?
Well, just that to remember that as I said, as Shaina said, as Tonia said, that the idea behind one thing isn't to replace what you're doing. It's to complement the work that you're doing already. And to complement any communications strategies or messaging or campaigns that you already have in place. If you need any assistance, we hope that the action guide will be able to provide you with a lot of those guidance around that. But if not, we at NRCDV's communication team and other teams here will be more than happy to try to provide some assistance for people who might be struggling with how to implement things within their own personal or organizational level.
Thank you, Joe. Thoughts, any ideas you want to share?
No, I just really, I'm excited to have been part of just the thought process behind this and really looking at how we create that story. And I just was very appreciative to be able to be part of this process, and I just look really forward to seeing all the wonderful things that come out of this and how we can keep this going. So thank you.
Thank you, Tonia. And what about Shaina? I know that you just finished your presentation. Any other thoughts that came up?
Yeah, just we're excited to see you all, be bold and really help lift up this really important messaging throughout the coming months.
Thank you, guys. So let's check the questions. Any questions?
I don't think so. I did see one in the chat earlier that somebody asked about being able to download the logo. And I know that Brecken already responded to him, but for those who may not have seen it, that when we send out the information for the action guide next week, it will include a link that goes to the online version, and you'll be able to download the logo as well as all the other types of graphics that we shared with you today, as well as many, many, many more that we did not put into this presentation.
Thank you, Joe. I see that Olivia made a comment, and she said that presenting this message to command on naval station could be a challenge. Any ideas, any suggestions for her?
I think I would have to think about it a little bit. I'm not sure right now. Maybe Olivia and I could connect personally after this, and I could get a little more information from her and a little more detail about what she means by that.
Wonderful. Let's see. Anybody else? I see some people typing. And remember, everybody, the idea behind the messaging is not telling our communities that you only need to do just the one thing and we're going to eradicate domestic violence. It's just the idea that, like all of you, all of our presenters mentioned, every little thing counts, and we can have a great impact in social change if we all come together and do just the one thing. Let's see. You still have people typing.
And Linda, you're welcome.
So again, while we wait for comments or questions, if you have a question for Joe, Tonia, or Shaina, just feel free to contact them directly. I'm sure they'll be glad to answer your questions. Thank you, Brianna, for your comments. Well, if questions, I see one. Do you suggest posting every day for DVAM on social media? And I know, Tonia, that you talk about that. So yeah, I absolutely. Oh, go ahead, Joe.
Oh. Well, I think we both probably have different opinions. I think that it depends on your overall strategy. And Tonia, I know you'll, with the strategy that NNED has, you do that. We also, in our CDV, end up posting just about every single day, sometimes multiple times a day, but it's based on the particular strategy that we developed around the messaging that we're using at the time. So I think you need to think about what your goals, your audience wants, and what you hope to accomplish out of your strategy, whether you believe that posting every single day will work for you.
Tonia, go ahead.
Oh no, Joe said it absolutely beautiful. So there's nothing else for me to add to that.
I'm so sorry to step on you, Tonia. I wasn't sure if you were still muted or not.
Oh no, you're fine. This is I don't know whether people know this or not, but this is kind of my first rodeo with the communication strategy. So I'm just excited to be on the call, but you answered that way better than I could have. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And remember, not only to focus on social media, learn about your communities. Especially, we mentioned the Latino communities. Other communities may not have access to social media. So remember that all of our materials are going to be, can be reproduced and customized. They're customizable. So you'll be able to print them, to post them, and, anywhere where that specific population that you want to reach congregates. It could be if it's in Spanish, a Latino center. It could be, social service. Maybe connect that can help spread the word. So I want to thank everybody. I want to thank our presenters, Joe, Tonia, and Shaina. You're going to and let us know if you have any questions, or if you have any ideas on things that we missed and we still need to add. It's a live document for you guys. Also, remember that we're looking for storytellers in any language. If you have advocates, survivors that would like to tell their story of what's the one thing that inspires them, what's the one thing that they're doing to create social change, we're here. We're looking for you guys. And our storytellers will again, our TV video during October. So it's really exciting. Great things. Keep in touch. Look out for where you're going to be able to give us your feedback. You're going to receive a survey, and after that, you're going to be receiving a copy of the presentation, a PDF format, a link to the recording of this webinar, and of course, the action guide. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. It's been a pleasure, and we'll see you next. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.